Summer of 1952. A cast iron bell on a post beside the back porch. A woman pulls the rope. The clang rolls out across 40 acres. Men look up from the rows, dust on work boots crossing the yard. The screen door to the summer kitchen is propped open with a brick, and the smell of lard and onions hits the porch before the men reach the steps. That bell is gone now. The summer kitchen is gone. The house that fed the land, and the land that fed the house, most of it has been paved over, partitioned, or replaced by something that plugs into a wall. These are 25 forgotten farmhouse features that only seniors remember. Most of them were not replaced by something better. They were replaced by something cheaper to sell. What went with them was not just the object, it was the knowledge. How to read a fire. How to keep milk cold without electricity. How to call a family home from 40 acres with nothing but iron and your own two hands. That knowledge lived in the hands of the people who use these things. When the last one who remembers is gone, it goes with them. This is what we are trying to hold on to before it slips away. Now, before we dive in, tap that subscribe button. You will not want to miss what is coming next. Number 25. The Hoosier cabinet. A freestanding kitchen workstation, it stood 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide. It had a pull-out porcelain top, a built-in flour sifter, a sugar bin, a spice carousel, a tin-lined bread drawer, and even a grocery list wheel. The Hoosier Manufacturing Company out of Newcastle, Indiana, produced 600 a day at its peak. Over 2 million were sold by 1920. Glass canisters made by the Sneath Glass Company lined the top shelf. The rattle of that sifter crank, flour dust on your grandmother's wrist. One cabinet held everything a woman needed to feed a family. It saved 1,500 steps a day. Built-in kitchens replaced it by the 40s. The company was liquidated in 1942. The most efficient kitchen in America was thrown out with the furniture. The Hoosier ran the kitchen. But on a working farm, the kitchen could not stay inside the house. Not in July, not when there were 100 jars to put up, and not when a cook stove turned the first floor into a furnace. Number 24, the summer kitchen. A separate outbuilding used for cooking, canning, butchering, and soap making during the warm months. In spring, the cook stove was dismantled, blacked with stove polish, and carried outside. In fall, it was carried back inside, apple butter boiling in a copper kettle. Steam rolling out an open doorway in August. Jars of tomatoes cooling on plank shelves. Everything that fed the family through winter was made in that room. All by women, in heat that would empty a modern kitchen in 5 minutes. Air conditioning sealed the house shut. The summer kitchen became a garden shed, then a ruin. Number 23, the root cellar. An underground room, 50 to 55 degrees year-round. You opened the heavy door and damp earth rose up the stairs. Potatoes and burlap, onions braided and hanging from the joists. Mason jars of green beans, pickled beets, and peach preserves lined the shelves. A kerosene lantern hung on a nail by the stairs. If the cellar was full in October, you ate in February. If it was empty, you went hungry. The word provision used to be a verb. 3 features in, and not one of them plugs in. The farmhouse ran on gravity, temperature, and the properties of the earth itself. Cold air sinks, water flows downhill, stone holds temperature. These are not innovations. They are physics. The people who built these rooms did not have engineering degrees. They had attention. They watched how the world worked and built accordingly. Number 22. The springhouse. A stone building over a natural spring. Cold water flowed through troughs in the floor, holding 50 degrees year-round. Earthenware crocks of milk sat neck-deep in that water. A tin dipper hung on a nail for anyone coming in from the field. You could smell the damp limestone and the cold. Pioneers chose the spring first. Then they built the house. When electric refrigeration arrived, the springhouse became a shed. The spring still runs. Nobody drinks from it. Number 21. The wood cook stove with warming oven. Cast iron, flat cooking surface, firebox, baking oven, and a small cabinet above that kept plates and biscuits warm. Glenwood, Monarch, home comfort. A home comfort range ran $45 to $75 in the 1920s, the tick of cast iron expanding. The hiss of water flicked on the surface to test the heat. Biscuits browning on the bottom first. Coffee on the back burner all morning. That stove had no thermostat. The woman who used it knew the fire by sound, by color, by the feel of the air above the surface. She was not following a recipe. She was reading a fire. 5 features gone. Every one of them stored, cooled, or cooked food without electricity. The farmhouse had its own system: gravity, spring water, moving air, fire, and the earth itself. The average modern kitchen runs 40 appliances and a $500 energy bill. The farmhouse had a stove, a cabinet, and a spring. It fed a family of 8 through winter. Number 20. The PIE safe. A tall cabinet, pine or walnut, with tin panels punched full of tiny holes. Stars, eagles, wheat sheaves. Pennsylvania Dutch immigrants brought the design in the 1700s. You opened the doors and smelled cooling pie crust and yeast bread. The tin was punched by hand, every panel different. Somebody put stars into metal so a loaf of bread could breathe. That is the difference between a tool and a product. Number 19. The Dutch door. Split horizontally into 2 halves. The top swung open for air, the bottom stayed shut to keep the toddler in and the chickens out. One door solved 3 problems without a mechanism more complex than a hinge. The Dutch brought them to the Hudson Valley in the 1600s. By 1850, they were standard from Pennsylvania to Ohio. The top half had its own latch, its own hinges, its own purpose. Open it on a summer morning, and the kitchen filled with light and moving air while the baby crawled the floor in safety. A mother could watch the yard, call to the barn, and knead bread without leaving her post. The design assumed she had more than one job at a time. It was built for a woman who was always working. Number 18. The boot scraper. A flat blade bolted to the porch step. The rasp of dried mud against iron. The ridge worn smooth over decades. Sears sold them for under $1. You did not bring the field into the house. The scraper enforced the rule without a word. Some were forged by local blacksmiths, with a curve or a scroll worked into the metal. Some were plain as a plow blade. Either way, the message was the same. The house had a threshold. You honored it, or you did not cross it. That scraper was the first thing a visitor saw at your door. It told them what kind of house this was. Number 17. The cistern and hand pump at the kitchen sink. A large underground tank caught rainwater from the roof, and a cast iron pump at the sink pulled it up. You could hear the squeak of the handle and the gush into an enamel basin. Rain on a tin roof meant the cistern was filling. The farmhouse caught its own water and delivered it by hand. When rural water lines arrived, the cistern was capped and the pump handle rusted in place. Number 16. The keeping room. The big room next to the kitchen, warmed through a shared chimney wall. A rocking chair worn smooth on the arms, a quilt over a sleeping child. The keeping room was where the family was kept. Warm, close, together. Not a living room, not a den. The room nearest the fire. Warmth was not a thermostat setting. It was a place you walked to. The farmhouse understood something we have forgotten. Warmth is not temperature. It is proximity. The family gathered in the keeping room not because it was the most comfortable seat, but because it was the warmest spot in a cold house. They sat close because sitting close was how you stayed alive in January. Modern houses are heated to 72 degrees in every corner. Nobody has to sit near anyone. The architecture no longer requires closeness. And so we drift apart in our own homes, each in a separate room, each on a separate screen. Number 15. The sleeping porch. A screen porch on the second floor, furnished with cots for summer nights. Mosquito netting tucked under the mattress. Tree frogs and crickets so loud they became the silence. Dew on the screen by morning. You carried your pillow out and fell asleep listening to the land settle down. The sleeping porch was the last room in the farmhouse to be walled in and air-conditioned into silence. Half these features were rooms, not gadgets. The farmhouse had more separate spaces than most modern houses twice its size. Root cellar, springhouse, summer kitchen, keeping room, sleeping porch. Each one built for one purpose. The average new home today is 2,500 square feet. Open concept. Everything in one room and nobody can find a quiet place to sit. Number 14. Oilcloth on the kitchen table. Heavy cotton coated in linseed oil, wiped clean with a rag after every meal. Checkerboard. Floral. The smell of linseed when it was new. It cost pennies. It protected a table that might have been the most valuable thing in the house. It assumed the table would be used hard 3 times a day and dressed for the job. Montgomery Ward sold it by the yard. You cut it to fit and wipe the crumbs into your hand after supper. When it wore through, you bought another piece and started again. The table underneath might have been walnut, might have been pine, might have been built by the man who sat at the head of it. That table would outlast the house. The oilcloth protected it the way you protect something you intend to pass down. Number 13. The smokehouse. A tight outbuilding with a fire pit and hooks across the ceiling. Hickory smoke seeping through the cracks. Hams hanging in cotton cloth. Salt-cured bacon, darkening over weeks. A full smokehouse in November meant a family would not go hungry. Smoke, salt, and time. No freezer needed. Number 12. Lightning rods with colored glass balls. Iron rods ran along the roof ridge, wired to a ground rod. At each base sat a glass ball, cobalt blue, amber, or ruby red. They caught the light at sunset. A barn full of dry hay and a single lightning strike could end everything. The rod was survival. The glass ball was a small act of beauty on something built out of fear. Number 11. Storm windows swapped by season. Separate frames, glass for winter, screens for summer. Carried up ladders twice a year. A Saturday in October, a Saturday in April. Father on the ladder, son handing them up. The house changed with the seasons because the family changed it by hand. The glass panes were numbered in pencil on the frame. Second floor, east side, number 3. A son learned which window went where by carrying them up. By the 3rd year, he did not need to read the numbers. He knew by the shape of the frame, by the weight, by the small crack in the corner that had been there since his grandfather dropped it in 1938. That kind of knowledge does not come from a manual. It comes from repetition, from seasons, from the body learning what the mind never had to be told. Number 10. The wood box. An open bin beside the stove holding a day's split firewood. Every child's first chore. Keep it full. If the box was empty, the fire was cold. If the fire was cold, nobody ate. A child who kept it full understood cause and effect before they could spell it. Number 9. The well house. A roof structure over the water well. The damp stone collar. The rope rough in your hands. The splash far below. A tin cup on a nail inside the door. The well house was the most important building on the property. Not the barn, not the house. Without water, nothing else worked. 17 features. Not one had a warranty or a customer service number. They were built by the people who needed them. A 10-year-old in 1940 could explain how the springhouse kept milk cold and what happened if the wood box went empty. That child had more practical knowledge of how a home works than most adults alive today. Children on a working farm were not decorative. They were necessary. A 7-year-old gathered eggs. A 9-year-old milked. A 12-year-old drove a team. They were not given chores to build character. They were given chores because the family could not function without them. A child who understood that, who felt the weight of being needed, grew up differently than a child who was told they were special. The farmhouse made no one feel special. It made everyone feel essential. That is not the same thing. It is better. Number 8. The rain barrel. Wooden or galvanized steel sitting under a downspout. The drum of rain on metal. Cheesecloth tied over the top. It was used for laundry, for the garden, and for livestock. Water fell from the sky and the house caught it. In some states today, that is regulated. The farmhouse did it without a second thought. Number 7. Feed sack dresses. Clothing and curtains were sewn from the printed cotton bags that flour, sugar, and feed came in. Staley Milling in Kansas City, Bymus Brothers in Tennessee, and Percy Kent in Buffalo printed dress quality percale in florals and plaids. 3 yards from the Sears catalog cost 60 cents. 3 feed sacks cost nothing. A woman picked the print at the feed store while her husband loaded the truck. She soaked the ink off, cut a simplicity pattern on the kitchen table, and sewed her daughter a dress that could pass for store-bought. Nobody called it poverty. They called it making do. By 1942, the mills were printing Disney characters and licensed patterns. A girl could have Snow White on her school dress if her father bought the right brand of chicken feed. The economics were invisible to her. She just knew her mother could look at a flat piece of printed cotton and see a dress inside it. That skill, seeing the finished thing inside the raw material, was not taught. It was inherited. 3 generations of women who could look at nothing and see something. Number 6. The walk-in pantry. A cool room off the kitchen, floor-to-ceiling shelves, a pull-out flour bin that held 25 pounds on wooden runners, the smell of cornmeal and brown sugar, ceramic crocks with stoneware lids, labels written in pencil. The pantry was not a closet. It was a room with its own climate and purpose. Open concept living eliminated the wall, and with it, the room that kept everything counted. Number 5. The cream separator. A hand-cranked de Laval on a cast-iron stand, the high whine of spinning discs. Warm milk poured into the top, cream from one spout, skim from the other. 42 steel discs washed by hand every morning. The separator turned a bucket of milk into cream for butter, skim for the table, and income for the family. The farm wife who ran it was not a homemaker. She was a producer. Number 4. The wash stand. A small table by the back door, a ceramic pitcher, a wash basin, a bar of lye soap. You washed before you sat down. That was not a suggestion. The wash stand enforced a standard. You did not bring the dirt of the day to the table. That ritual is gone. The standard is negotiable now. The pitcher was filled fresh every morning. The basin emptied after every use. A towel hung on a rail beside it, changed on Sundays. The soap was made in the summer kitchen from lard and lye, gray and hard and sharp enough to cut grease off a plowhand's knuckles. This was not about hygiene alone. It was about the boundary between work and rest, between the field and the family. You did not blur that line. The washstand held it. Number 3. The mud room. A small room between the outside door and the kitchen. Pegs for coats, a bench for boots. The smell of wet wool and damp leather. You did not walk from the barn to the table. You stopped. You scraped. You hung up. You washed. Then you entered the house as a person, not a farmhand. That distinction mattered. Number 2, the dog trot. An open-air passageway between the two halves of the house. The kitchen on one side, the living quarters on the other. Dogs slept in the shade of it. That is the name. The breeze funneled through on a still day. The dog trot solved the heat by building the house around it. 2 rooms and moving air. Every sealed house with central air is an argument against that idea. The dog trot was the answer. The design came up from the Carolinas with settlers moving west. 2 log pens, 1 roof, open air between. You built the first room, lived in it a year, then built the second when you could afford the labor. The breezeway connected them and cooled them both. Families sat there on summer evenings. Children slept there on the hottest nights. It was not a room and not outside. It was the space between. The farmhouse understood that some of the best living happens in the in-between places. Porches, breezeways, thresholds, the places you pass through on your way to somewhere else. We have eliminated most of them. The modern house is all destination, no journey. Number 1. The dinner bell. Cast iron 14 to 20 inches across, mounted on a post by the back porch. C.S. Bell Company, Hillsboro, Ohio. Over 20,000 bells were cast in 1889 alone. Crystal metal stamped on the yoke. The clang carried a quarter mile. You felt it in your chest before your ears caught up. Whole counties rang at noon. You could tell whose farm was whose by the pitch. The dinner bell meant the same thing on every farm in America. Come home. The food is ready. The work is done for now. It was not a text. It was not a notification. It was iron and air and a woman's arm. And when it rang, people came. Because that sound meant the one place in the world that was theirs was calling them back. The bell was not decorative. It was not a collectible. It was a tool for a specific job. And the job was holding a family together across distance. A woman who rang that bell was not announcing dinner. She was saying, "I see you out there. I know where you are. Come back to me now." That is what the farmhouse did. It held people, not with walls alone, but with systems, with rituals, with rooms that had one purpose and did it well, with objects that required your hands and taught your hands in return. The knowledge was in the doing, and when we stopped doing, we stopped knowing. The suburban house that replaced the farmhouse is larger, cleaner, and emptier. It holds more furniture and fewer people. It requires less work and produces less meaning. Every convenience was a trade. We traded the root cellar for the freezer and lost the knowledge of what keeps. We traded the summer kitchen for air conditioning and lost the tolerance for heat. We traded the dinner bell for the group text and lost the sound of iron over open ground. The last generation that heard that bell across open ground is the last generation listening right now. When they are gone, no one alive will know what it sounded like to be called home. And if you want more forgotten wisdom from the generations who came before us, the next video is waiting for you right now.